Hello Anthony, thank you for using my online critiquing service. So far this is probably the hardest painting I've had to critique for some time, and the reason for that is because it has so many personal hallmarks within it. What do I mean by hallmarks? That is distinctive features that go together to make up a style of painting. So therefore it's very hard for me to say these are the rules and this is the areas that you've done really well and not really well. It doesn't quite fit into that. It seems to me like an exhibition piece. While it can stand alone on its own, it works very well. It seems to be part of a greater body of work, and that would be interesting to know if it's part of a larger body of work. It's very much thematic. I'm wondering whether you're working on a stream of paintings like this, but it's very well resolved. I think that you've achieved a lot of what you were setting out to do, which was to do a painting that is about depression, about loneliness, but you also said you wanted it to be about hope. And I'm not sure about the hope part, but let's have a look at all the positive things that you've done. On a work like this, it's also an artist does work consciously, and they try to achieve certain outcomes, but often, particularly on a work like this, there's something happening at a subconscious level, and maybe there's a fair bit of you in here, and there's a fair amount of commentary about this topic that you not necessarily were unintended of, but it's come through very, very clearly. Let's have a look at the positive things that you've done regarding this picture to talk about depression and loneliness. Let's have a look at the composition, and then we'll have a look at colour and other elements of design. Firstly, you've got this figure, which is a great device. It's neither male or female. It's got a long, slender body, but a big head. We're not sure male or female. It's very much in a fetal position. And so that works really well. And you've handled it not in a clumsy way, but in a really sophisticated way how you painted that figure. And they're off to the side. And because they're in that fetal position, does feel like they're vulnerable. And you follow that tradition of having a naked person. Naked person is great for showing vulnerability and depression because we don't see the status and stature of that person in real life. Clothes can say a lot about a person, but by the fact that you have them naked means really they're stripped naked, and that's a great painting tradition that you follow through on. You have an interesting device here because she's out in the wilderness, out in the bush, and we've got these trees that are gnarly and folding over. That's both a good and a bad thing, and we'll talk about the positive things at the moment. Why it's good is because it's these trees, even nature's against you, and they're like big fingers coming down, and we are normally repelled by those sort of shapes because our brain can't work out whether it's real life or not, but we've got these sharp shapes, and it's dynamic because you've got these light colours against the dark. The other skillful things that you've done here, we go from a dark area down to light, and in the sky it's really dark. So normally most people would go the other way. As they're going off in the distance, they probably go dark, but you've done it light. So that works really well. There's a good sense of perspective in the back there. Very cleverly done to fill up that area. And so we've got this person in a bit of a hollow, and so that's how you do feel if you're a bit depressed and lonely. You feel all alone and in the hollow within yourself. So there's some nice things happening there. Everything's against you. We've got these two big trees on either side which form a nice kind of frame in a way and makes it nice and solid. So I think you've got some really good devices there. The way it's handled technically is very, very good. Now, I don't have the original work in front of me. I've just got a photographic image, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, but to me it looks a very slick sort of painting. It's interesting that you've got these eyes here that are neither male or female. It's like a rabbit in headlights, really, and the style of eyes doesn't quite fit with that figure, but it's very effective, almost as if they're drug-induced or they're in another place. And they're not looking at the viewer, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. So what we have is, our eye goes in here, looks at this figure quite easily because they're up in foreground, that's great, and then our eye goes down to the background. But I think there's a few problems. Let's have a look at the problems. Well, one is, the good thing is that you've got these black, whites, greys, and those sort of negative or neutral colours make us feel in a particular way quite lonely and depressed. What this picture reminds me of, in some ways, and I think it has the same sort of message, is Andrew Wyeth's picture of Christina's world. We have the figure, and the figure's not looking directly at us, so there's not a relationship between us and them, as if we're a bystander, not an innocent bystander, just a bystander. Well, maybe not innocent, either way, but the person's not looking at us, so there's a real sense of alienation, both them and for us, because we're looking at them. Maybe we're another lost person in the scene, and that's what I was talking about what artists do subconsciously. So she, and I say she, but it could be he, is not looking at us, they're looking out there into the blankness, and so I think that device works really well. We've got a nice comparison between the warmth of the colour of the body and the neutral or cold colours of the background. Now, let's look at what doesn't work as well. And it's your desire to have a sense of hope, and I don't see hope coming through this picture in any particular way. That's because the light's coming to the side, so that whatever's happening down, well, we have two light sources. We have a light source that's coming from the back somewhere, but we've got one from the side here as well. But this figure's not looking towards there, so there's no sort of hope. And they've got this bleary-eyed look as if, oh, I don't know where to go, what to do now, there's no hope. So that's something that we can work on. How do we improve the narrative to make sure there's hope? And that's probably the main thing I want to focus on. I wouldn't want to fiddle around with anything that you've got there, because I think they're good devices and they're yours, and maybe these devices reappear in some of your other works. And as I say, I think they work, and there's a very skillful painting technique in there as well. For me, what I would do is this. I would put a figure in through here, and first off one just there, probably slightly distorted like this figure as well, although you could work with a figure that's not distorted, because then that might be a nice comparison between a really distorted figure, one that's in pain and agony, and one where a person's really confident and searching and looking for that person. With a torch, and with a torch perhaps on the background of this figure, so the figure isn't aware that they're being found and there's a solution at hand, but the person's looking for them and has found them, so they're happy. So you can have this figure back through here, realistically happy, I found this person. You've got to be careful it's not in a very threatening way. It's very easy to do the person with the torch looking quite threatening, as if you're an escaped convict or something like that. But so that's what I do. I'd probably also have some small figures way down the background. They could possibly be silhouettes just with some lights going off in different directions, to say that it's not just one person looking for this lost soul, but there are several. I think that's even more positive. And I'd have those further back through here. I'd have a light beam coming up, kissing the figure through there, just highlighting. So they're not aware that they're going to be found. This reminds me also of not only Andrew Wyeth's painting of Christina's world, where she is unaware of the people looking at her and not able to help her, but this also reminds me to some degree of Frederick McCubbin's Lost, of this child that is lost, who's not aware that there are people nearby to help her. That's probably all I would change really with this picture, because it's got a really distinctive style. There's some really good things happening. There's not a lot that you can do to change the background or tinker with anything else. There are probably some other little props or other things that you could put in here as an afterthought. Depends on how you want to develop that narrative. But just to give hope, I would say a person looking for it. There are some inconsistencies in style slightly, but I don't think that detracts from the picture. I think the picture's got a great deal of power. Yeah, it's an unusual picture. I think it's really unusual. You really love it or you hate it. This is not a sort of picture I put on my wall, mind you. And that's why I come back to the exhibition pieces. When you go to an exhibition, it's about the whole story of all the works going together to tell a story. And that's what this does, but I wouldn't necessarily go to a lot of exhibitions and want to buy those works and have them hanging on my wall. I would find this a really depressing piece on my wall, but it would certainly be a talking point. And so I would suggest to you, keep going with what you're doing. I think it works really, really well. Maybe get someone else to have a look at your work at your rough stage and say, this is what I'm hoping to achieve, this and this with my narrative. What would you do, or what do you think needs to be added or taken away? Just get other people's point of view. But I think you're on a really good pathway. I think keep on going with the style and technique and the hallmarks that you have, because they're very solid, they work really well, and I think you're on a winner. So well done. Here is my suggestion of what you might be able to do. Mind you, my suggestion, my digital imaging that's going to come up in a minute, was done very, very quickly. It's not a great painting by any means. It's just to give you an idea of what you might do. It doesn't include the other figures that I suggested in the background, side view with torches. So this is just the starting point of how you might be able to make some minor changes, but to bring about your goal of having more hope in this picture. Well done. Thank you.